Thanks, Curtis.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Building Use and Visioning Committee. I am Mike Licklider. I'm the superintendent, and it's traditional for the superintendent to start off new committee meetings. But our first order of business is a chair, but the board has already listed as Chair J.B. Weir, who was voted on by the full board after he was nominated by Ashley Wood. So I just say, JB, are you willing to take that role?
I am.
All right. Well, the meeting is yours.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everybody. So the board members present and on this committee are Cindy Senning. Hello, Cindy. And Ben Clark. And then we have Lisa Essler, Dr. Mike, Ray Daigle, and our board chair, Ashley Woods. Does not look like there are other members of the public here aside from Cam and David. I don't see them on, but I see them listed as attendees. You're muted, Mike. Oh, there you go.
There's David.
I see him now. There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Hey, David.
Hey, everyone.
Hey,
Sorry
guys.
about the delay, Cam, David.
No worries. We all arrived at the same place.
That's right.
That's what counts.
That's exactly what counts. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. I don't see any members of the public here, so I think that we don't have a public forum necessarily, so we can kind of dive right into the goals of the committee, the master planning process, update, discussion, and our timeline for action. So I kind of want to start off with getting some feedback from the David and Cam, as well as Ben and Cindy, and see what they think about some goals for this process. I know we don't have a lot of time, considering we have a final report that is due by January 31st. So I have, been learning myself up on the Addison County School District, which I know Truex was involved in the master planning and the facilities there. And boy, let me just tell you guys, that was a really fantastic document. I learned a lot from that, especially going into this. So that's it was really some great work. So I've kind of made some notes, and I do want to hear from Ben and Cindy too, and what they think. But one of my overarching goal for this committee is to analyze the reconfiguration options based upon the guiding principles of the Harwood Union Unified School District, which I believe are equity, effectiveness, and efficiency. And I think that's kind of the end goal for me. I have a lot of goals that fall under that in order to get there. But for instance, here.
I think those are fine goals.
Yeah. So I guess I do have some questions. So I guess Ben, thank you. I appreciate it. Do you have anything else to add as far as what you think we're looking for here?
No, I mean, I think you hit the mark in terms of we want to make sure that we're hitting not only what's not just what's equal, but what's fair. Mm-hmm. But also what can we get for like the most bang for our buck. Mm-hmm. And then also what can we do how we can strive forward together, to make sure that we have a meaningful impact with our tax dollars, for the people that we've been charged with, which is our community's little ones. And not that we can put a price tag on that, because frankly, children are priceless. But we want to make sure that we're being as meaningful with those tax dollars as we can be, and building the kind of futures that we can with our residents' children, to build the kind of futures that we had built for ourselves by all of the taxpayers that came before us.
Mhm. Thanks. Cindy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I read through the options. I thought they were really helpful, and I liked the way they were laid out, with the with the schematics of the schools. I was very curious about the options that talked about not having Brookside at all and how that might work. I'm very curious what the architects thought of that whole thing. I know the issue of Brookside and its condition is certainly something we haven't talked a lot about. We know that it's an issue for us, but we really haven't talked about it as a board. So I thought that was really interesting to bring that up in the options.
Yeah, no,
And I thought the options were interesting. I'll be very curious to hear some of the financial aspects of those, and also just what they require in terms of building development.
yeah.
So
Oh, absolutely. Thanks,
Thank you.
Cindy. And before we dive into the options, and I do have a bunch of questions for Truex and what I think we need in order to make some most informed decisions here. There's some wording I found that I just wanted to I think really encapsulated the entirety of the process. And I know this is just a facilities committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. We're going to be informing kind of a master plan. In the end, the master plan is or not going to be born from this committee. It's gonna be more in conjunction with outreach and the overall board. Am I correct on that, Mike?
Generally, it's filtered through this kind of committee
Okay.
to the whole board and then get the whole board input. But I think this would be the group that would really facilitate that process. And I know David and Cam have some presentations they can go through as well when all of you finish.
Okay. Great. Well, that's great. That's exactly what I was hoping to say. So, and I'm just going to read. I highlighted some things from the ACSD, and again, I don't. We're obviously two different school districts, but I think this is really encapsulates everything we're trying to do here. And so, just as Truex has done a lot of work in the past, in examining our buildings and our deferred maintenance and what's needed going forward. I really think so. We're not reinventing the wheel. I think there's a lot of good stuff in this document. So some of the things that I really took to, I think two overarching goals which feed into the one goal I mentioned are ensuring that the investments in our buildings and infrastructure support our student learning objectives and align our built environment with our strategic vision. The second one is developing a strategy that would guide both short and long-term planning and decision-making as it's related to three objectives: creating a positive learning environment for students and staff in the schools, meeting the fiscal responsibilities of the taxpayers, and achieving our vision for equity, effectiveness, and efficiency.
Yeah.
There's so much there's so much more I could say and want to go into, where there's opportunities and challenges. And I really think over the last couple of weeks reading up on all this, I think I got a really good handle on what we need to do and where we need to go and how we need to get there. And I really appreciate this document, which you had sent me. I am understanding that the themes that we are trying to achieve, or the goals we're trying to achieve here, of max 45-minute bus ride for elementary schools, 60 minutes. This is in no particular order. 60 minutes bus ride for middle school and high school. Ideally, centralized preschools, one each for the Valley, and then one for Waterbury and Duxbury. As far as elementary schools, K4 or K-5, 2 sections per grade minimum. Middle schools, one for the Valley, one for Waterbury, Duxbury, with a consistent grade configuration, be it 5 to 8, 6 to 8, or 7 to 8, like we see at Harwood Union Middle School. High school, grades 9 to 12, moving the HCLC to Harwood, and the science and STEM labs is a priority. And you also have themes related to alternative programs, and then those all are kind of fleshed out in the various 8 options, although there are a lot of to be determined. I was really struck, living here in the Valley, knowing the history of the schools, the locations, and past reconfigurations, consolidations. It was really eye-opening to see one of them in particular, the first one, which has historically been floated around in the past, and seeing how that really seems to fail compared to a lot of the others, and as far as achieving those objectives that I just mentioned. So I really thought this was very informative. So I have some questions for Truax and some things that I think the committee would need going forward. But I think it's a good time to open it up to Cam and Dave and let them get going.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think other JB and Ben, I'm not sure we've met before, but Cindy and Ashley, we've worked together, and obviously we know Mike and Lisa and Ray quite well. I knew Ray when he was a young man. No. So
He was young.
What's that?
He was young.
Yeah, I was probably too. So I have a slide deck with and it goes through some of the things you probably have seen already. I don't know if you've seen the slide deck already because it is on in the Google Drive. I don't know, Mike, did you share that or did you? No. Okay. Let me share my screen if I'm able. And we can kind of go through this. And I think this will frame the conversation nicely.
You should have presenter access.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So we want to just go through the process and schedule overview. And JB, you summarized the themes that came out of. So what we did was we sent questionnaires out to all the elementary school leaders and middle school leaders and high school, and these are the themes that emerged pretty clearly out of the questionnaires that we sent from them. And then we had a meeting with them to kind of clarify all of this. And so it's, it sounds like these themes can become the planning guidelines or should become. That's something we wanted this committee to confirm. So we'd like to, coming out, that's a goal of this meeting. We'll talk about the capacity of the schools, the existing capacity, because I know that was a question. And then we'll run through the planning options because and how that relates to the capacity, and talk about next steps. So schedule wise, we are at this dashed line. We are this little red box here. We're working, so we want to confirm the planning guidelines. We also need help narrowing down the reconfiguration options. So, right now there's like 8 or 9 options, and it's too many. I mean, maybe it's not too many, but it's a lot to go through and crunch the numbers and with all those. So if there's some that we can take off the table, that would be great. Our original proposal talked about that we would really drill down to 3. That may not be possible, and we're flexible. So just think about that as we're going through, and then once we narrow down those options and we crunch the numbers, then we can do the cost modeling, and we want to talk to you about how we're thinking about presenting the cost modeling. And we'll show you an example. Any questions on that? The final board meeting, the board, we have a January 23rd. I think that's a board meeting. We're hoping to get on that agenda to present the findings of this portion of the work. And we have another meeting with you folks on January 13th, 15th scheduled. I don't know if that's already been scheduled, but the idea is that we'll we'll narrow down the options. We'll do the planning work related to that. We'll do some cost modeling, and then we'll be back in January to present that to you folks. And then basically, refine, based on the feedback we get from you folks, refine the presentation, and then, um, you know, make that presentation to the school board. And, you can decide, you can think about like, you don't have to decide now, but like, are you going to want to, at that point, here's 3 options to consider, and does this committee recommend one of those options? Is there going to be a recommendation as part of that? Because that's really the role of this, as Mike was saying, the role of this committee is to listen to all of the, look at all the work that's been done and presented, and then make a recommendation to the board. That's what we were imagining, and you folks can decide if that's how you want to do it.
Mhm. That sounds great.
Yeah. So as you said, these are the themes. I'm not gonna, you summarized them really well, but the theme about keeping the bus rides to a reasonable length and equitable access, centralized preschool, um, just 2 section per grade minimum. Now, depending on whether you go with optimum or maximum sizes, you're looking at a school of 192 to 246, which is much bigger than any of the schools here except Brookside, which is quite a bit more. You can see um, the total number of students in the valley is 387 at K through 5. So it's probably more like a 3 section or 4 section per grade school total. The middle schools, as you mentioned, one for the Valley, one for the Waterbury Duxbury, consistent grade configuration. And you'll see that, but we do have some options where they're combined. And I know that wasn't necessarily discussed with the educators, but when we were iterating all these different options, we were like, well, we should show this one because, there's some value to it. But those are the kinds of options that if it's a non-starter to have one middle school, then obviously that could be eliminated. Nothing really major about the high school, other than we know it's one of the older buildings that needs a ton of work. And as you mentioned, there's these 2 smaller things that don't really, aren't as structurally important as some of the other things we've discussed. And then this one, this idea of an alternative program, um, one for the Valley and one for Waterbury Duxbury for the elementary school, and then one for the district for at the middle and high school level. And there's some reasons here we listed, like there's a moratorium on alternative school charters right now, and it's less expensive to provide it in-house. So we're hearing a lot of districts are moving in this direction because of there's a lack of capacity for these therapeutic programs in the state. So we calculated the capacities, and you'll see the asterisk there. There's um, a lot of caveats. We used for now, we used the state board maximum per grade. not the optimal, and we could recalculate it under optimal, but seeing as how this exercise was about partially how many kids could we fit in each building, we did this way. And we can easily, this is a decision point as well for this committee. Do you want us to present it in the future in terms of the optimal number of students, the capacity based on that, the maximum, or show both? But right now we've just calculated maximum capacities. Now, we did that unless the space size was too small to go with that maximum. And here's another thing is we based it on the number of classrooms currently being used as classrooms. So there's a number of classrooms in these schools that are like, have, special ed has taken over a classroom. And do they really need 750 square feet? Probably not. But we just said, for the purposes of this exercise, we're just going to look at classrooms that are currently be using as classrooms, assuming that, well, special ed may not need 750 square feet, but they're going to need a bunch of space. And for now, it's a placeholder. But that, when we start to drill into these different options, we can really kind of look at that a little more closely. We used 50 square feet per student for kindergarten and middle school and high school science, 35 square feet per student for all other grades. And these capacities include pre-K. So if the plan does call for centralized pre-K, you pick up a couple of classrooms in these schools, or one or two. And also, if these schools become K through 5, you pick up the 6th grade classroom. So you do pick up 3 classrooms, let's say 2 or 3 classrooms in some of these. These numbers include pre-K and 6th grade. So I just wanted to kind of run through our notes there. So option A is pretty straightforward. Fayston Elementary School is repurposed, and those students go to these schools. They're distributed equally. They could be distributed to one. And as you can see here, we did a little on the left-hand side. We just sort of took the planning goals and then commented on whether they met or didn't meet the planning goal. And we don't achieve the 2 section per grade minimum for the elementary school. I will say it's worth noting about the 2 section per grade elementary school is that, as you mentioned, JB, that you wanted to balance equity, effectiveness, and efficiency. The 2 section per grade school, getting schools of sufficient size meets both the effectiveness and efficiency criteria. It's one of the few things where you don't have to there's no creative tension between the two, because when you get these slightly larger schools, you can offer more programs, you can staff them better, you can staff them more efficiently, and it's sort of a win-win, and or a win-win-win. But some of the other things, there might be more tension, but not with that one. So it sounds like people have had a chance to look at these, so I won't spend a lot of time. Um, in this one, we're combining Fayston and Warren, and we get close to the we're at 206 and 251. So we do achieve, and it says fail, but we do achieve that size we're looking for in these. The Fayston Warren nexus is a little bit on the small side, but it still meets the criteria. You can see at K through 5 of 192. Here actually it's K through 6, so it is a little on the small side for K through 6. But there's no changes to any other schools here. This is simply combining schools in the valley. The next one I thought was pretty interesting. This was creating aligning, basically modeling the valley schools after Waterbury Duxbury. So creating a middle school that's 5'8" in the valley, and creating one elementary school that's pre-K 4. So you can see, you know, we showing Waitsfield becoming that school. It has 323 students. That's, far in excess of Waitsfield's capacity. So you'd have to add additions and things like that to make it big enough. And then if you tried to create the middle school at Harwood at 5 through 8, you'd also have um, 262 students. The capacity right now is like 160. And but there's a question at Harwood, like, could the middle school take over some of the classrooms to the north of that middle school area if it needed to expand? We haven't done the analysis of Harwood. I know, in general, schools tend to use every square inch they have. So it may require an addition at Harwood or building a new middle school to achieve this one. This one is creating 6 through 8 middle schools. So this would be adding less, the load at Harwood would be 192 instead of 162. So, sorry, 192 versus its capacity in the 160s. So it's not as much of a reach to be able to create a middle school of 6 through 8 at Harwood in this scenario. But here what happens is that we're taking the 5th graders out of Crossett Brook and moving them back to Brookside to create the alignment piece, which may or may not be necessary. But what we hear about Brookside is that they're already at capacity. Now, when we do the analysis of the classroom capacity, it's at 399. Which would be plenty of room for, you can see the 372 K through 5 students. But the issue, I think, I know one major issue is cafeteria, for example, at Brookside. And Ray, you may know of other pinch points, but the cafeteria kitchen situation is already very taxing. And so adding more students there would require some modification of that building. To you know be able to handle that, accommodate those extra students. The next one is oh, why is this is a repeat? That's weird. BC. Oh, I went the wrong direction.
Wrong
Sorry.
arrow button.
Yeah. It's like that looks awful familiar. So we talked about this is, I think, did we talk? Oh, this is one I think we looked at a few years ago, was moving all of the middle schoolers to Crossett Brook, and going with 6 through 8. It could be that it's 5 through 8 all students, but we made it 6 through 8. That has the same issue with Brookside. The number of students at Crossett Brook is 390. The capacity, I'd have to go back and look. Cam, what was the capacity of
Off the top of my head, I can't recall. I don't have it pulled up in front of me.
all right,
It's in another slide. I can look in a moment.
Yeah. There's some question with Crossett Brook, when we look at these plans, because there's a lot of classrooms at Crossett Brook, and they have labels of what they're being used for. And we assume, like we were talking about with special ed taking over a classroom, that it's being used at its best and highest use, but we don't really know until we drill down to know that. Could we could we consolidate some of the like support services and add capacity in terms of classroom? The one thing about CrossFit Brook is that, it has these pods, these four kind of 5 classroom pods that are team pods, and those are all full. So you could maybe create a couple of more 2-person teams that were just really 2 classrooms with no common space, but you couldn't really create another full 4-team, 4-teacher pod with 80 to 90 kids in it. There really just isn't the space to do that um, at that school. Or you could go with a different model. You could say, okay, now they're 5 class. I mean, it's a little odd for a middle school team to be 5 classrooms because usually you have your 4 core subjects and the students, rotate through those. But I suppose you could come up with a 5-person team and get more capacity that way. So this one is closing Brookside and making CrossFit Brook a pre-K through 6, and then having all the 7th and 8th graders at Harwood, and then combining the pre-K through the uh, the Valley Elementary schools into 2 schools. So in this one, once it's same issue with Harwood is that now we're trying to get 100 more kids at Harwood, and is there capacity there? Would we have to do an addition? The and CrossFit Brook would have 432 K through 6 students. I believe, let me just go back to that slide for a second. Capacity slide. So CrossFit Brook was 359 the way we recently calculated it. So um, it would be too many students. Just go to view slideshow. So you couldn't really, you couldn't really fit, we don't believe, all of the pre-K 6 from Brookside into CrossFit Brook, but you could do pre-K 5, pre-K through 5, and maybe go 6 through 8 at Harwood, which would be, and so it's kind of a juggling game. And then the final, well, is this the final one? Yeah, the final scheme is a little out of the box, but we know that people are really concerned about the littles traveling to the big school, and the other towns. So this one was creating, leaving the littles in the Fayston, Warren, and Moortown, but then at grade 3 you would go to Waitsfield. All Valley kids would go to Waitsfield, and then we'd align the middle schools in the 6 through 8 model. So this one would require some um, additional, partnering with either the towns or other nonprofits to get the right blend of uses in the school, and we don't really know yet whether this one represents any kind of cost savings in terms of operational efficiency. It does get a larger school. You can see Waitsfield is now 246 students, so it's a very robust 2-section per grade size school. But it does mean you still own and have to operate the same number of structures. So, but we just wanted to put it out there just to kind of iterate as many different options as possible. So it's a lot to digest, I know.
Sure is. Yeah, this option was striking. I certainly out of the box does get the best score, at least preliminarily on the planning goals. But that was my one takeaway or negative takeaway is how much does this really achieve a cost savings, given that all the schools remain operational. And if Waitsfield, I mean, Waitsfield could probably come close to handling that number of 246 if they're going to lose a sixth grade. And then with potential additions on the wings, it might be feasible. But yeah, this one I would love to. I don't know if you guys can put any more meat on this bone. Before our next.
My issue with this one is that your other schools are half empty then. You know,
Well, I
you've
think
got,
that was, yeah, I think that was David's point is we'd have to be a partnership with the towns to use a portion of the building as community space so that the district isn't footing the bill for the entirety.
Mm.
But that's, I mean, I think that's one big
Yeah,
thing here
like in
is-
Underhill, they took the one of their schools and they put central office in half of it, and then the other half they rent out to a nonprofit. I think it's a preschool or a daycare or something like that. Um, and I think it's worked out well. They happen to have like two schools that were, you know, less than a mile away from each other. Um, so there was no real dislocation of
Mhm.
having to travel. But there are some examples. There's not a lot of examples.
Yeah, and of course with the dearth of childcare, um, that's potentially an option. I'm still wary of the overall cost savings. Um,
I don't think you're going to find any cost savings in this model.
yeah. Well,
I
yeah.
think, I think that the meat on the bone is sort of the next step of looking at what does this mean for personnel? What do these different options mean for personnel and operating costs? And because what does happen is that all of the schools that you become K through 2 become very inefficient, and our analysis will show that when it's complete.
Okay.
Um,
Good.
Somebody should, and maybe I'm not seeing it, where Granville is and all that.
I was going to mention that 30 kids from Granville filter through the Warren School. We wouldn't want to lose them.
Yeah. We took we were given the number of students from, I think Lisa provided us with the data on the top there. I assume that includes the Granville students, but
Could, yeah.
yeah. So I think that's the talk about costs is a good segue. We are playing with, this is one of the ways we talked with Mike and Lisa and Ray about this is to, one of the, when you have buildings that are older and need work and and when you have to modify some of them to meet your long-term goals, there often is some costs related to that up front. It's it, in an ideal world, there'd be a zero cost option to make this reconfiguration happen. What we're showing here is that the is a 20-year look ahead, and what we've got is four categories. Operations and maintenance is the orange, and that we're calculating at 3% of net replacement value. Capital renewal, which is the light blue, is 4% of net replacement value. And what we have on the top is the status quo. If you do nothing, right, you have the blue and the orange boxes. Those are your 7% that you're your carrying of net replacement value to take care of your buildings, hypothetically, right? And then you can see how your operating costs keep going up. On the bottom is a scenario, and this is totally hypothetical that we made up, where there's an initial investment in terms of a bond, but some schools are there's some you can see there's the blue bar, upper blue bar is your salaries and benefits. The dark blue is much smaller on the bottom because we're getting more efficient. Maybe we're repurposing some schools, but there is more money being spent um, in the terms of a bond payment on the bottom to take care of new construction and capital renewal. But you can see overall what happens is, the lion's share of your what you spend per year is in the dark blue band, the salaries, benefits, and all that. And so, like, when we just ran this hypothetical scenario out over 20 years, it saved anywhere from like 60 to 80 million dollars, which you might say, you know, on a 20-year period, um, does that really matter? Or you might say that's significant, like, because you're spending like $1.5. So if you're saving 80 million, is that significant? Does that matter to taxpayers?
Well, and just to be clear, I think that these numbers are actually built on numbers from a different district. These are not your numbers. This is not Harwood.
No,
And
no.
I think it might be more. I think the annual budget for the whole Harwood district might be larger than what's shown here, just for what it's worth. This is
Yeah, and this is all hypothetical. This is just a mock-up. But our sense of it is that, you know, in a way, you might have to like spend to save. In other words, like, if you make these smart investments now, you're going to save taxpayers, you're going to bend the curve and to save taxpayer money, compared to the status quo. And that's what this graphic presentation is showing. I mean, we will be able to uh, show what the costs, in a very broad brushstroke way, if we have to add additions. What we don't have right now is because we haven't done the facility evaluations, we don't have a handle on the deferred maintenance costs, except for at Harwood, because we've done those, but we haven't done them for any other building. Um, so what we're using is this capital renewal, this 4% of net replacement value, which is an APPA, the Association of Physical Plant Administrators recommendation. And basically what it's saying when they say that 4%, if you think about 4%, if you do that for 25 years, you're basically every 25 years completely, it's 100%. So you're renewing your buildings every 25 years. That's what that percentage is, I think, based on. Um, most people, most clients, most institutions don't use short-term money to make big investments like that. You borrow money because you're making a long-term investment. You might as well pay for it over time. And so that's what, you know, the the bottom is the kind of reconfigured approach, not necessarily for Harvard, as Cam said, but just in general. And you can see, though, even though you know, the tough part, I think, is that you ask people to spend money now to save money later, and most people just want to save money now.
Mhm.
I think just one other quick caveat, and this gets to the what's the axiom? The cheapest time to do it was yesterday, the next cheapest time is today. Because one thing that you'll note is that all of these numbers escalate over time. The cost to do your ongoing maintenance goes up because of inflation. The cost to operate your district goes up with salaries and benefits because for the last several years, for a decade or more, it's been healthcare. But if you fix your buildings, that bond payment is like a mortgage and it stays the same. So it becomes a smaller and smaller portion of your expenditure over time, which I think is notable. And also a caveat for this graph is this kind of assumes like you're going to wave a magic wand and you're going to do it all in year one. And in truth, it's probably going to be staggered and staged. So you can kind of, if you do it right, you ease into it. It's not a hit all in one year. So those are just a couple caveats about this illustration.
Any questions about this?
I have a
Any,
question.
yeah.
So you just said you're not using like true to life deferred maintenance numbers on these different buildings in this exercise at all, or just not yet? I ask that because the public is expecting us as part of what we're going to understand. I think that the public is expecting us to be able to deliver how that number per building weighs in on what should be closed or what, you know what I mean? Like that's a factor. So
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
4% good enough? I mean, that seems a little loose to me, considering we want to know specifically which ones are the ones that need the most.
Yeah, that's my main concern here too. And I noticed that in the ACSD report that it was highlighted that one issue as far as the community forums were that residents did not have a clear enough sense of the relative urgency of maintenance needs, nor a refined estimate of the actual repair cost for any of the schools to really make a
Right.
concrete decision.
Well, yeah, so we have not, I think we did in our original proposal included um, a facility evaluation of all the buildings. That was not, it was decided to hit the pause button on that portion of the work. So yeah, we can it is, to your point, Ashley and JB, it's we don't have that information. We're using the 4% as a placeholder. And you know, um, and we
Can
could get
Ray
that.
help? Can Ray help with that? I mean, I don't know if you guys can work together. I just feel like it's gonna be a gap if we don't
Uh,
have it.
I would
Well,
be very hesitant to bring options to the public without at least, and I know it's a lot, especially with this tight timeline. But if we have something, there's something already out there, and maybe we could put some numbers to it. Maybe they're far from exact, but something to bring to the public. Like, look, this is the state of this building, and it just makes sense that we have to repurpose it, or what have you.
It's gonna matter.
Yeah.
It's definitely.
yeah, well, I don't disagree. So what is available is the Bureau Veritas report that the state did of all the schools in the whole state. And, they are kind of drive-bys, they were very down and dirty, very quick. We could, it's not part of our scope right now, but we could add the scope of updating those reports with, because one of the complaints about those reports is that the costs that are included in them are just not realistic at all. So, you know, a stopgap move would be to try and, update those costs, and at least you'd have a relative difference. You'd be able to see like, okay, this building, you know, needs more work than that building on a square foot. You know what I mean? Like we hear that Brookside is one of the older buildings and needs the most work, needs a lot of work. Obviously, Harwood is also rather old. We know that Warren was worked on, had a major upgrade 7 years ago, so it probably has a lower needs. But so the correct way to do it is for us to um, with a team of engineers, do a proper facility evaluation of all the buildings, but it costs money and it takes time. So, that's why it was paused.
I didn't realize that. I thought
And
that was
that's,
part of that.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
yeah, that was one of our original goals, and then we had to prioritize what the work was, and this seemed to be a higher priority. So if you go back to their original proposal the board approved, I guess it was in the October, November timeframe. I just pulled it up. It's in their proposal for future work.
Okay. I just wonder, I mean, that's fine is if it's in like stage 3 or 4 of this plan, except that, I think we at least need a ballpark number on each building, whether we get that from our own facilities people or we do use those records you're talking about. I hesitate to, I mean, we're looking at modeling, but the modeling is only as relevant as the open schools, right? So if there was a school that has terrible, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like maybe we need to, I see that it's in future work, but maybe we need to have something alongside this original set that just at least tells us what we do know about our buildings. What we do know are the weak spots, because people want to know that.
Cam?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, Cam or Ray, you both have your hand up.
Go ahead, Cam. You had yours up first.
So it's a little bit crystal ball gazing, even in the best of times. Even with you get a team of engineers together and they comb through your buildings. It takes them a day or more in each building. They write up detailed reports. They look at the age of each component. And we do the same for all the architectural components, the windows, the brick. We analyze insulation. We look at accessibility. That's what's entailed in that larger effort of doing a facility evaluation. And even when you get all of that information, you do a very detailed analysis, it still is a little bit of a dark art how the estimators put together those costs. So anything that we put out short of that is going to be probably wrong, and we don't even necessarily know how wrong. And there's risk in giving the community information without it having been vetted and checked by experts.
Mhm.
That's
Sure.
I hear you.
we fully understand exactly what you're saying, and I think to your point, each one of those reconfiguration options, what you really want to know is, okay, well, if we're keeping this in this building, what do they need individually? And
Exactly. Or
yeah.
that this one has devastatingly, it's so expensive, it's not worth it.
Yeah, we
like
should
that's,
rebuild. Yeah.
well, I know, but I mean,
No, I get it. Yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
mean, and I hear you that that's a whole separate project to figure out, but we as board members are constantly throwing around this $20 million worth of deferred maintenance. We say that number, like we know what that contains. I'd like to know, I'd like to at least have a little bit better knowledge of what we're talking about as it pertains to our buildings. But I understand that
Mhm.
it's further down the line. I got you.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have to be that much further down the line, but it's a question of what does the board have tolerance to budget for this effort. So
Right.
Ray?
When I went through I would say just when I went through this process before, it really is the full master planning process. You're looking to a year to a year and a half. So we're trying to really jumpstart this, and it's not just Harwood. Buildings throughout Vermont have deferred maintenance. So Ray can address. Ray has a good idea what that is, but we have not gone through and done a formal facility condition index.
Right, and I was gonna just, also echo what Cam had said, is the accuracy of what we put out there. If we shoot from the hip, we're probably gonna get shot back. So we gotta be careful there. Also looking at Bureau Veritas, um, as David said, the numbers are way off from reality in this area. and they didn't include everything in the buildings. They were really system based, and we have a lot of envelope issues. So I think that's all things that we need to, you know, uh, you know, us working with David and Cam, trying to come up with some numbers is going to be the best thing, and it is going to take a little bit of time.
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
So, here's some questions that we've alluded to throughout for this group. Should the themes that we ran through, we were kind of reporting back what we heard from the questionnaires and the meeting with the educators, but confirming that those should be the planning guidelines. Um, and are there any other guidelines that should be added? And for example, should we take the options? So the next question is, are there any options that can be eliminated, or are there any that should be added? For example, the ones that show one middle school for both the Valley and Waterbury Duxbury, is that still on the table? Is that off the table? What's the board's role relative to the planning guidelines? In other words, should they be adopting or affirming or acknowledging them? Like if we show up in January and say, okay, so here are the planning guidelines, is the board going to be like taken aback and say, well, wait a minute, who said you get to determine what the planning guidelines are?
I think there's a very real chance of that. Yeah. I mean, I hesitate to doubt. I mean, if you put this out to the schools and this is what came back, I don't second guess those who are doing the work here on a daily basis. I have to admit I was a bit surprised. But this is my first time diving into this. So I don't want to second guess them. But I do think the board should be I do think it's important that the board understand the planning guidelines before rather than at the end. It would be my take.
yeah.
Ashley?
I think there could be some adjustments maybe. And I don't know if it's worth our time to explore the option that has those K through twos at those outer schools. I mean, that just seems peripheral and kind of pie in the sky to me.
Yeah.
I'm curious and I want to talk. I love that there are these options. I'd love to go over the guidelines again, and I'd like to make sure that we are all on the same page. And I agree with JB that I think we need to triple check with the board before we're too firm on those choices. Not that I disrespect admin. I don't. I know what they're trying to achieve, and that's what we want. However, I feel the weight of the physical structures weighing in on this discussion. So I'd love to have a little more time to like sort of percolate with these ideas personally. I know I have my few favorite pet ideas that I think they're in here somewhere, but so I don't know. I'm a little bit I'm not sure yet if this is the right set of themes or guidelines. Those words are a little amorphous to me.
And maybe just for verification, just so I'm straight, we have this timeline set to have basically a facilities report out by the 31st with some recommendations. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the master plan and official master plan document, what have you, we're looking at a year and a half. Maybe
Well,
is this report? I mean, we're not coming up with a master plan in 6 weeks, are we?
No way.
Okay.
no, I think this is my understanding was this was to start the process, and it could be that, like with the Addison Central report, they never said, okay, we're going with option D.
Yep.
This is the one. They said, here's the three that we're considering,
Mhm.
and that's as far as they could get, and also COVID happened to
Yes, yeah.
rear its ugly head. But so, that's another thing to think about is like, what is the end goal of this process by February 1st? Is it to make a single recommendation that this option should be explored in more depth, or is it here's three options, here's the pros and cons,
Yeah.
let's keep talking about this. So I think
That's
this group should really think about how much closure do they want to bring at the end of January.
Yeah, if I could just, I'm sorry, just jump in there. I think I do not want to have come up with one reconfiguration option in 6 weeks. I would like this committee, and I'm just one member here. To three is what I had in mind. I like the idea of bringing three to the forefront, and then having a series of some community forums, taking this out there, discussing it at the board meetings, and really you know involving the public in this process because some people are going to be happy, others are going to see the loss of their school, their anchor, their community center. In my mind, I see us coming up with three viable options and then presenting them to the community at large.
I think that has a lot of weight because I think when you're looking at some of the things you've said are, Brookside is the one with the most problems. That's Waterbury's center. That's a big school with a lot of heart and a lot of great things going on. So that's if we're floating that idea or something to do with that, that's major for that town. When you talk about closing the Facein School, you're talking about something huge in the valley. So I agree with JB. We've got to have options to discuss in terms of closure by February. For me, I think, and I'm preliminarily saying this, I think it's really about showing the work in progress. We all know this is going to take longer than 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever. This is a process. So I'm okay with it with when we get to February that we have not made a decision. We just have more meat on the bone, as it were, of what the options are and where we're progressing.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts here. I think I'm a little more just because of the context of everything that's sort of happened with our district, and where we are, and the fact that we had sort of a bond through together before sort of the state sort of blew things up a little bit. I was thinking it's probably not a bad idea to sort of start to think about things that are sort of not viable, right? So like when we look at those lists and we start to see, well, these ideas are not viable. They're not viable because the school systems are overpopulated, right? That it's okay to start whittling them down just simply because of basic pragmatic numbers, rather than to say, well, we falsely have all of the choices, right? Because we don't, because we've got, if we were to go with this one choice, we've got way more kids than they have room. And that's not really a choice, right? So if there is a way to whittle down some choices, just so that we can get to some ones that are, pragmatically speaking, ones that we can absolutely move forward with. And I agree. I don't think we should be doing anything with, it's definitely this, let's move forward with one. But moving forward with several options sounds like a good plan, but whittling them down, I think that's something that we could probably do very easily. And in addition, I think probably thinking about hitting the gas, so to speak, in a way that doesn't necessarily keep having to reinvent the wheel on this because we've done this for a while now. So thinking about ways to say, well, okay, Truex Collins has been with us for a while. We've done this with them for a while. What do we need to know further to make some hard decisions, so that we can get some viable options to bring to the rest of the board so that they can help the rest of us make some good choices for the community. And I think the community at large wants to make some good decisions, some investments in our community, that help all of us grow and help all of us thrive. And so I'm willing to help in that process, and I think others are too.
Thanks, Ben. Cindy, you've had your hand up for a while. You're on mute, Cindy.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I think that we also need to be a little bit careful that we have a bunch of themes and keeping in mind all of, I think the themes are good that you came up with, the early themes that we looked at. And I worry about when we just start talking about the finances of it, you know, what we need to pay to get this building set or that building set or do this or do that, that there's more than finances to be considered. And I think that's what the administrative team is looking at pretty carefully or closely, I think. And I just think we need to be keeping that all in mind, that there's more than just the finances of it. A lot of this has to do with the we talk about equity, and in the different areas of our district, whether we're able to provide the same kind of an educational opportunity for kids throughout the district based on a reconfiguration of the way we do schools. I think that part's as important as what it costs us to do that reconfiguration.
Cam?
Thanks. I would just say that, we're contemplating a process where we do answer these questions, and in particular, I just wanted to note, something that we've already learned through the beginning of this analysis, for instance, is that you can't make none of the schools in the valley right now could be a two-section pre-K through 6 or pre-K through 5 even school without an addition. None of them are large enough for that. So I think, all of the options that are not the status quo are going to involve adding on to some building in order to close another building. And that's a fundamental truth that we can already see. It's immediately apparent in the analysis of space use. So the various permutations and which buildings cost how much to add to in order to make them functional, and how does that play against how far away they are from people, how long the bus rides are, and all of these other things that are all part of the considerations, is partly why it takes some time. And I think what I'm hearing is that this group has a disposition to try and whittle down to a set number that are realistic and can be discussed by people in the public, so you can get some feedback, board can make decisions, and we can move the process forward. Is that a fair summary?
I think so, yes. Yeah. Absolutely. That's what I had in mind. And just jumping on what you said, Cam, and I think I would like us to, in the short term, when obviously we don't have much time, but I'd like at least the committee members to take a hard look at this document and pick out some nuances. I'm not, and I have a question for Mike, and I just have a couple things to ramble off here. I'm not entirely sure about these planning themes, and my first question will be to Mike and what you think. Did you expect this? Does this make sense to you? The themes that have been generated, and then two, what mentioned, there are some constraints. And Cam, I'm sure you know now that my job here in Waitsfield is planning and zoning administrator, wastewater project. So yes, we are absolutely looking at the ability to expand Waitsfield. I know that that Facein is there's nowhere for Facein to go. There's nowhere for Moortown to go. It seems like in some of these options, I see Brookside being expanded. I think this committee really needs to take some time and try to pick out some of these nuances and see if there might be another option out there. So I was rambling. Sorry, Mike. What do you think about these plenty of things? Do they all make sense to you? Is there something else that?
Of the 8 options,
No, just the themes, the themes that that the Truex got the feedback from admin as far as the sections and the our planning principles that these are based on.
I think they're the admin team planning principles, but that's why we wanted to do that work first, bring it to the board, because the board's representative of the community. And you're the ones who have to really take a look to see what do you envision for the future, and then give that feedback to us, and we can help refine that for the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
don't think it captures everything. No,
I don't. And I don't know, how do we get there? How do we get to those? How do we capture as much as we can in this tight timeline?
Well, I think part of it is, in my thought would be, if we get this initial phase, and get some ideas, then we do something, kind of a version of what we did last year, Ashley and Cindy, with our bond meetings, that we have maybe 2 meetings, and we're not talking at people. We're just putting up the different boards, the different options, getting input on what people like, what people don't like. I know David and Cam have done similar processes like that, and getting the community input at that point and bringing it back, and then folding that into the next step, which is to go a little deeper with how that would play out in our buildings, what the building state is, and what the conditions are, and start to build some buy-in of the themes that our community thinks is important.
Thanks, Mike.
Excuse me, I have a cold.
No, you're doing great. I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, you sound like bleep.
Yep.
No.
Get it out of the way before the holidays.
Yes.
I just gonna interject because I gotta go because somebody has to take me out for dinner. I can't do anything about it. But I just want to say, I hear what Mike is saying, and that we're building on information, we're adding on, we're gonna learn more as we move through. But JB, I think you're onto something. I think this committee should look at these options that we've been given and apply the nuance we think is missing right there on that page. Let's print them out and just write your notes about what is it about. I mean, like, I'm seeing a little positive in each of them. Like, I see a good piece, and then I'm like, but that won't work because of this. But so maybe it's like it's a giant sandwich or Oreo of these concepts. But rather than, I know we want public buy-in and we want to talk to the public, and I want that too. I think that, it's hard in committee to know what your job is because you're like a piece of the board. I think this committee's job is to find that nuance and to slim down the options to 3 options or whatever that are a little more us. So this is a whole big group full of smart people. Let's do our job first before we kick it back to the board. We have work we can do here that will help Dave and Cam. They know what we want. So if we can give that a little clarity just right here, I think we'll have some success. And on that note, I'm going to go.
I would agree, Ashley. We don't want to go back with 8 different options. It has to be narrowed.
No. I guess just one quick thing before you go, Ashley, should we hold off on having a discussion with the board as to these planning themes or planning principles? And should we just hammer it out ourselves?
Yes, I think that we're going to do a piece of the work right here, and going back to the board, when we do go back, we should have, do you agree with me, Ben and Mike and Cindy? We just go back with less to talk about, but more centralized on what's realistic.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, we've talked a lot.
Absolutely.
We've all talked a lot. So
The board,
David had some comments, but David, as part of that,
Coming on us.
go back to the schedule and kind of show, because we're not scheduled to go back to the board for a full report until after this committee meets again. So that's somewhat of the idea, that this was organizational. You would consider some information. You'd send us back to the drawing board. We'd come back to you at the next meeting.
love it.
Okay.
All right, everybody.
All right, Ashley,
Have
go have dinner.
finish up, and JB, I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, there's the schedule. Yeah, we do have another meeting. But I think that work, JB, and Ben, um, and Cindy, um, the quicker, we're going to be we have some work to do, but we're going to be waiting for you folks, to do, because we hadn't planned on it, nor do we want to analyze all 8 of these,
Yeah,
in detail,
certainly.
because
Right.
it's a fool's errand. I do want to say though, I think, like, when I imagine, okay, what's somebody going to say at a public meeting? And I think one of the questions is going to be, hey, isn't there like a no addition option? Is there an option where we don't have to build any additions? And I think the one, Cam was saying, none of the schools except for Brookside can become a 2-section per grade school, um, without some sort of form of addition. And I wonder, like, option 1, it doesn't meet that criteria, but it might not require any additions. And, like, is one of the planning guidelines minimize construction?
Yeah.
Minimize new construction, for example, or is it just I just feel like if we don't have an option that makes some attempt at minimizing it, even if it doesn't meet the criteria, like 2 sections per grade, that somebody's going to ask for it. And
Mhm.
if we have it modeled, if we have it both, we analyze that option, and then we have it, that bar graph modeled, and maybe it shows, we don't know. Maybe it shows that there is some savings over time, or maybe it shows
Mhm.
actually no saving over time. So, anyway,
Yeah.
that's just a thought.
No, I agree with you, David. And maybe it's not quite a no construction. Maybe it's a no construction slash least amount of construction.
Yeah, minimize.
And
Like,
that's,
is that a
yeah,
planning theme? Like,
yeah, yeah.
minimize
hmm
the amount of construction, new
hmm
construction.
Yeah. No, I think I think I'd like to see, yeah, I think we should include that as a theme. Okay.
Because that would,
Yeah, go ahead, finish, Dave,
well, I was
please.
just going to say, I think if we don't have something like that, the public might find this process a little tone deaf.
Yes. 100%. Agree. So let's make that a point to include that going forward here.
Yeah, I think one of the maybe perhaps missing conversations here is, and I think for JB and Ashley and others who did not sit through the meetings where these themes and planning goals came about, is that
Mhm.
you missed the discussions about um, the role of equity and how the schools are structured, and in particular the increase in efficacy as you move from a 1-section to a 2-section to a 4-section school. And a little bit of this is picked up in the Picus report, which I don't want to get into, but it should be required reading, I think, for school board members and administrators, because it really gets to the heart of one of the big cost. And I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think it should be said out loud, because the driver of this project at its heart was, how can we help to find ways to reduce the burden on taxpayers and still provide a quality, equitable school project? So it's kind of at the heart and core of what we're doing, and the planning themes and guidelines were part and parcel of that process. Um, and the anecdote that really struck us was that, you know, you have a 1-section school in the valley, and then you have a 4-section school at Brookside, but they only have twice as many specialists, even though it's 4 times as many kids.
Mhm.
And so So all I'm saying is that there's really good motivation behind a lot of these, and I'd be curious to have the question framed for board members. What do you think is missing? And I think David's onto something with this kind of something cost related, because it is part of what we're doing. I hope that wasn't too long-winded. I just felt like
No,
it really needed to be said that that's kind of at the heart of it.
I haven't, is this Pikus report? I don't know, do you think somebody could send it to me? I see a lot of Pikus.
I'm not by the way, I'm not endorsing the Pikus
Yeah.
report. It's
I
just,
just like it for background. I've heard of it before, but I'd like,
I can send it to you, and I can actually send you a link to our Ed Finance Committee meeting from the commission. We got to question Larry Pikus, who's the author of the report. I'll send you both.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
can you send that to us too, Mike, as well?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I think I might have it, David, but
Okay,
top of
I'll
the
send-
inbox would be helpful.
I have it right up. I'll send it to you guys right now.
Thank you.
great.
Thanks, Lisa.
So I have a hard stop at 7:30. So I
So-
just want to make sure everybody,
Yeah, absolutely conscious of everybody's time. So we will meet again. I see, okay, so I mean, I see we have two meetings. I'm sure that's somewhat somewhat based in the costs for this work. So we obviously, I think the committee needs to meet a couple times at least in between, or at least once in between those meetings, if not twice,
Right.
to work on this. Ben and Cindy, we can schedule something maybe with Mike, Ashley, and Lisa, or at least, if we can't get everybody, if we at least had the three of us to get some work done before we meet with Truax next. I think that's ideal. So we can take that offline. I'll circle us all in tomorrow via email and see if we can pick some times. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Maybe we can all meet for coffee.
Let's do it. Not a drink, not quite yet.
Well, just a note that on a serious note, it does have to be, even if it's a work session, it has to be a public meeting.
It does, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so okay. All right, so let's we'll do it offline tomorrow. Let's pick at least one date that we can get warned in between this and the 13th to the 7th or January 15th. Okay?
And I have a question. Would you folks prefer a link to this Google slide deck or a PDF emailed to you? Like with the slide deck, so you have what we saw tonight. Because we can do either.
Either is fine with me. I always prefer a PDF, but you can always download the link. So it's either one.
Okay.
Is fine.
All right. Well, I'll send the link.
I think probably, in all honesty, the PDF. That way, if we have any kind of internet connections or anything like that, we always have the PDF right there.
Yeah, I can easily download a PDF.
Okay.
No problem.
Great. Well, thank you all. I'm sure we'll be in touch here and there over email. I'll put out some potential meeting times tomorrow for the committee that we can get together, not take up Truex's time, so we can try to hammer this out.
And I took minutes while we were meeting. And
Thank God, Mike. I got some notes here, but you're the best, despite being sick. Thank you so much. Well, that's great. I think this is a great start. I'm really it's a large task, but this is the first step, and I think some real concrete change that I think this district is finally going to finally follow through on. So, thank you all for your time. And do we need motions to adjourn in committee meetings? Let's do it anyway. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Cindy?
moved.
Second. Awesome. All right.
Second.
So we have 7:27, Mike.
All
Everybody
right.
have a wonderful holiday. And
Yeah,
thanks
you
for all
too.
your hard
Thank
work on
you.
this.
Nice
And
to
Cam and
meet
David,
you
I really
all.
appreciate it. That's
Okay.
very good work. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a
Bye.
wonderful holiday.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye-bye.
You too.